Question 117 of the Summa Theologia. We are now down to our final three questions of prima pars, and this one is interesting. 4 articles of things pertaining to the action of man. Now that sounds so general, and what exactly does that mean? And what you're going to see is one article that's kind of in depth, and then 3 articles at the end that are pretty easy to explain, pretty not too complicated. But what I want you to do as we continue to move through the Summa is to begin to see the themes and to begin to see the terminology and connect it back to all the other things that we've learned, okay? Because I'm really going to start stressing this a lot, because as we finish prima pars and go into prima secunda, it's going to really be necessary that we take what we've already learned and apply it to the things that we'll learn in the next section, like law and grace and merit and justification and virtues and all these kind of things, right? So first part of the Summa has been mostly, well, I guess you could say metaphysical. It's angels and God and, being and essence and form and matter and that kind of stuff, very metaphysical kind of stuff. But it's going to get really interesting. But you have to have that foundation before you move on to the next section, right? So this one, I find this interesting because the question is whether one man can teach another. And I think if anybody was asked this, they would have a one-word answer and just say, yeah, of course. I mean, a person can teach another person, right? Let's move on to the next article. Well, St. Thomas Aquinas doesn't take that approach. He, in fact, gives a very long explanation of this. It's interesting, and I want to kind of dig into this and see what we can pull from it. So bear with me. I'm going to read most of the corpus from this, and I think you'll enjoy what he has to say. Okay, so can one man teach another man? On this question, there have been various opinions. For Averroes, now remember, Averroes is one of the 2 Muslim philosophers that St. Thomas Aquinas quotes quite often in the Summa, the other one being Avicenna, right? He commented on De Anima 3. He maintains that all men have one passive intellect in common. All right, so immediately you should think, well, what's a passive intellect? Now, Thomas and Averroes have very different ideas of passive intellect, but to Aquinas, it's the passivity we have to basically know all things. So the passive intellect is in potentiality to know everything, but it's not until the active intellect goes out there and actually lights up the phantasms that we actually know something. So for Aquinas, it's potentiality, right? So he says, from this it follows that the same intelligible species belong to all men. What's an intelligible species? Intelligible species is something that we can come to know. An intelligible species of a frog or a cat or a dog, or it has to do with universals. An intelligible species can also be a grouping. As you go higher in the hierarchy of angels, for example, the intelligible species can be broader. Like, for example, an intelligible species of a house would include all the parts of the house. And the universality is very important, as we've already talked about, in understanding the levels of epistemology, the levels of knowledge, with God being absolutely universal, and then the seraphim, the cherubim, the thrones, and all the way down, right? Okay, consequently, he held, this is Averroes, that one man does not cause another to have a knowledge distinct from that which he has himself, but that he communicates the identical knowledge which he has himself by moving him to order rightly the phantasms in his soul. So Thomas isn't going to like most of this, epistemology of Averroes. He's going to, disagree with some and agree with others, but so that they be rightly disposed for intelligible apprehension. This opinion is true so far as knowledge is the same in disciple and master. If we consider the identity of the thing known, for the same objective truth is known by both of them. So if you know a dog and I know a dog, or you know that 2 plus 2 is 4 and I know 2 plus 2 is 4, it's the same knowledge, right? We've come in contact with truth. We have discovered truth which is out there to be discovered, right? So that's what he's saying was, in some way this is true. But so far as he maintains that all men have but one passive intellect, and the same intelligible species differing only as to various phantasms, his opinion is false. Okay, that's where he's breaking ranks with them here. Besides this, there is the opinion of the Platonists, who held that our souls are possessed of knowledge from the very beginning through the participation of separate forms. Okay, this is the realm of forms of Plato. But that the soul is hindered through its union with the body from the free consideration of those things which it knows. According to this, the disciple does not acquire fresh knowledge from his master, but is roused by him to consider what he knows, so that to learn would be nothing else than to remember. Remember, so Plato believed in innate knowledge. You're born with everything you need to know. It's already there. You just have to go around the world and kind of, you see things in the world, you see these shadows, and then it brings to mind what you already know, but it had to be kind of lit up by, the things that you see. But against this, we have proved above that the passive intellect of the human soul is in pure potentiality to intelligible species, as Aristotle says. Aquinas is going to agree with Aristotle a lot more than he agrees with Plato on things. We must therefore decide the question differently by saying that the teacher causes knowledge in the learner by reducing him from potentiality to act, as the philosopher says. In order to make this clear, we must observe that of effects proceeding from an exterior principle, some proceed from the exterior principle alone, as the form of a house is caused to be in the matter of art alone. Okay, so this is, somebody comes up with an idea of a house, and they make the house, right? So it's all external. The house doesn't have anything internal that's contributing to what it is. It's all from the outside. Whereas other effects proceed sometimes from an exterior principle, sometimes from an interior principle. Okay, so he's going to give a very interesting example here, and it's going to have to do with health. And it's going to have to do with a doctor. Let's say I have a flu. My body will naturally start to try to heal itself, but there also can be an external influence, like a doctor who gives me medicines that help the body naturally to heal. The body's doing what it can, but then something from the outside comes in and helps the body move along, okay? So he says, thus health is caused in a sick man sometimes by an exterior principle, sometimes by an interior principle. That art in its work imitates nature, for just as nature heals a man by alteration, digestion, rejection of the matter that causes the sickness, so does art. By art he means the doctor, something coming in from the outside, but as helping the principal agent, by strengthening it, and by furnishing it with instruments and assistants, of which the interior principle makes use in producing the effect. Thus the physician strengthens nature and employs food and medicine of which nature makes use for the intended end. So what is he saying here? He's saying it's the same thing with learning. Remember, this is all about, can a man teach another? There's an internal principle that we can know, and then the outside influence, the teacher, can stir that up. Okay, that's what he's going to get at. So here's how he explains it. Now, knowledge is acquired by man both from an interior principle, as is clear from one who procures knowledge by his own research, and from an exterior principle, as is clear in one who learns by instruction. For in every man there is a certain principle of knowledge, namely the light of the active intellect, through which certain universal principles of all the sciences are naturally understood as soon as proposed to the intellect. Okay, so there's like a innate kind of like proclivity that we have to truth that's in us already, right? Just kind of like our body can heal itself from a health standpoint. Now, when anyone applies these universal principles to certain particular things, the memory or experience of which he acquires through the senses, then by his own research, advancing from the known to the unknown, he obtains knowledge of what he knew not before. Wherefore, anyone who teaches leads the disciple from things known by the latter to the knowledge of things previously unknown. The philosopher says all teaching and all learning proceed from previous knowledge. Okay, so it's already kind of there, which almost sounds like Averroes in what he said, but it's there, but then the teacher helps to the student to recall it or sharpen it or perfect it, right? Now the master leads the disciple from things known to knowledge of the unknown in a twofold manner. First, by proposing to him certain helps or means of instruction which his intellect can use for acquisition of science. For instance, he may put before him certain less universal propositions of which, nevertheless, the disciple is able to judge from previous knowledge. Or he may propose to him some sensible examples, either by way of likeness or by opposition or something of the sort, from which the intellect of the learner is led to the knowledge of truth previously unknown. Secondly, by strengthening the intellect of the learner, not indeed by some active power of a higher nature, of the angelic enlightenment, because all human intellects are of the one grade in the natural order, but inasmuch as he proposes to the disciple the order of principles to conclusions by reason of his not having sufficient collating power to be able to draw the conclusions from the principles. Hence the philosopher says a demonstration is a syllogism that causes knowledge. In this way, a demonstrator causes his hearer to know. Okay, I know there was a lot there, but what basically he's saying is that there's an interior principle of knowledge that comes from within, and then there's an exterior principle of knowledge that comes from without, and that's the educator. So yes, one man can teach another, but it's not entirely from the outside. Some of it is already inside us. Okay, so thanks for bearing with me. I know that was a long article. Can a man teach the angels? I want to make this very quick. No. Remember, we already learned that a lower angel can't teach a higher one, and so man is not able to teach the angels because they have more universal knowledge. They're smarter than us, and so we can't really do a whole lot. Whether man, by the power of his soul, can change corporeal matter. He's going to say here, no, also. Okay, corporeal matter is not changed to the reception of a form, save either by some agent composed of matter or form, or by God himself, in whom both matter and form pre-exist virtually. Wherefore, of the angels also we have stated that they cannot change corporeal matter by their natural power. And so he's going to say, if the angels can't do it, then certainly we can't as well. The reason I have a rat here is because it's corporeal. It has a body, right? Also a soul as well. Article 4, whether the separate human soul can move bodies, at least locally. I love how Thomas explains this. I'm going to read it in its entirety. It's very short. It's not going to take but maybe 30 seconds. The separate soul cannot by its natural power move a body. For it is manifest that even while the soul is united to the body, it does not move the body except as endowed with life. Okay, so the relationship between the soul and the body. If I didn't have a soul united to this body, I wouldn't be teaching this class. I wouldn't be doing this lesson. I wouldn't be moving. I'd be a corpse, right? So that if one of the members becomes lifeless, it does not obey the soul as to locomotion. So what he's saying is that if all of a sudden I lost all ability to use my hands or my legs, right? I became a paraplegic or a quadriplegic. Just because I have a soul, that's not enough. The soul doesn't have control of saying, okay, start working again. It doesn't have that power, right? And if it doesn't have the power over its own body, then how's it going to work on any other kind of corporeal thing, right? Now, it's also manifest that no body is quickened by a separated soul. Therefore, within the limits of its natural power, the separated soul cannot command the obedience of a body, though by the power of God it can exceed those limits. So what he's saying is, when a soul separates from the body, let's say it decided, like, I want to go back into that body, I want to animate it again and bring it back to life. Well, a soul can't do that, clearly, because if it did, that would happen all the time. It just can't. So the soul, by its own natural powers, is not able to move bodies locally. Okay. All right. Well, I know that was a little bit arduous, but hopefully that made sense to you. Hopefully it was interesting. And we're down to our last two questions of prima pars. We'll see you tomorrow for that next one. God bless you. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us.